Let's talk about Pandora by Holly Hollander by Gene Wolfe. That's right, Pandora by Holly Hollander by Gene Wolfe. The blurb. My name's Holly H. Hollander. The H is for Henrietta, so you can see why I don't use it. Born in a sprawling suburb of Chicago, Holly is an all-American girl. Kind of tall, long, curly brown hair, a little waist she can nearly get her hands around, and a burning ambition to write. Pandora is the story of an unusual box discovered at the annual antiques fair and what happened when it was opened. It's a murder mystery, a family tale and a love story. Holly falls for the private detective Aladdin Blue, but it's also something else, something altogether different. This must be about Gene Wolfe's shortest novel. It's a Nancy Drew mystery. It gets often quite slighting reviews, even from some people who like Wolfe. I think other people are like, oh, I don't really get it. It was okay. I think it's really interesting. I'm not sure if it's the best introduction to Wolfe. I think Fifth Head of Cerberus is probably still better. This is simpler than Fifth Head in some respects, but therefore it's partly less representative. I think someone who didn't get why people liked Wolfe at all might manage to miss the things he's doing in this really very interesting book. It's a mystery book. It's about a girl who, there's a murder at the antiques fair, and she gets caught up in investigating it along with this private detective Aladdin Blue. Her family is heavily implicated in all the events around it, so are some of her friends, and it has lots of murder mystery tropes and things that happen and gimmicks, and you get the idea. And the mystery is competent. It's not an Agatha Christie. It's not a sort of, oh wow, there's like 10 suspects, there's good reasons to suspect at least 9 of them, and maybe it's the 10th because maybe it's a twist, and you're trying to work out the whole time, going back and forth what the evidence is. You're trying to remember that. There are even winks, by the way, at that kind of thing. I think towards the end Holly says, you know when you go back in a mystery novel and underline all the key bits of evidence, she says, she then says, I'm going to sum up what I think the key evidence is. But yeah, this idea that like in those novels there's so much going on. There's much less going on here. Wolfe proves himself to be an adept mystery writer, but not an all-time great. Not up there, say, with most obviously Christie, maybe Ellis Peters with Cadwell, or in a very different vein, James Elroy with the LA Quartet. Those are one kind of set of mystery and crime books. This is, complexity-wise, actually at the lower level it should be. It's a Nancy Drew mystery. It is a book written by Holly Hollander, written by Gene Wolfe. So you have this strong authorial voice, and this is where you realise it's a Wolfe book, because what's going on with this authorial voice? What information is she telling us or not telling us? How are her perceptions of characters good or bad, or helpful or unhelpful? A useful parallel is in Book of the Long Sun, for those who have read it. There's definitely some presentation about some of the characters, like how some characters are presented at particular times in particular ways, which may seem more or less generous to us, but we're not really clear. We're not sure. It's hard with that book. Here, it's much more explicit. Pandora likes her dad. Sorry, Holly likes her dad. Doesn't necessarily like her mum as much. There's a lot of other good characters, interesting characters. Aladdin Blue is a guy with a shady background who describes himself as a criminologist and walks with a limp. That's what we know from the start. And he's a really interesting character, particularly in Wolfe. Parallel perhaps to Kirk as well, Russell Kirk's ghost stories and some of the heroes there. But he's a really interesting kind of Wolfian, Kirkian, Chestertonian hero. Of course, Chesterton, a great influence on both Kirk and Wolfe. If you want to, there are Kirk ghost story reviews on this channel, so people may enjoy that. Decent mystery. Authorial voice is interesting, and it is an exceptionally well realised Nancy Drew voice. I would say that's one of the biggest things to take away. Is you just, as a gimmick, it's incredibly well accomplished. But the bigger thing, I think, is that without this being, I'm going to tell you, it's not secretly all about alien abductions or anything crazy like that. The kind of theories you might get. It is relatively simple to get to grips with some of the things that are going on, and it depends on your view of Wolfe as an author. Is he essentially trustworthy, or is he essentially untrustworthy? I go for the former generally. Some people go for the latter. Other opinions are available. But I would say that a big thing going on here, using the authorial voice, is to explore this issue of this box which is inscribed with Pandora on it, and the fact the myth of Pandora's box comes up, and a discussion of what that means, the power and meaning of myth, and what the box therefore in a sense represents, and the way the story is set and framed, and the way in which it's a family story, as I've said, the way in which Aladdin Blue comes out as this outsider with a dark past, potentially, or at least a mysterious past. We'll put it that way. I think that's fairer. There's this thing, you're like, okay, there's a bunch of themes going on here with a partially untrustworthy, and by that I mean complex, biased authorial voice. I don't mean a lying authorial voice necessarily. I don't go down that path. You might if you read it. But I would say, with all that together, you realise that there is actually a pretty serious meditation on themes of good and evil, of integrity, of redemption, of family, of all kinds of things like that, which are much more interesting than you'd expect, well, bluntly from a 200-page Nancy Drew novel, but certainly also from the analysis made of it by some people. I recommend it. It's good. You'll read it quickly. Pardon me. I don't really highlight any major issues with it. It's probably not the best introduction to Wolfe if you're thinking, I want to read a really weird book by this guy that's still relatively easy to read. That book is The Fifth Head of Cerberus. Or if you're like, I want to read something really short and just understand some of how he thinks, read some of the short stories, some of which are actually pretty much straight and direct. This is somewhere in between and is misleadingly simple. But if you're up for that as an introduction to Wolfe, or up for that because you've read Book of the New Sun or something like that, I'd highly recommend it. That's my view on it anyway. I'd love to hear what you think. Tell me in the comments, and I will see you next time.